It's the kind of comment that stops Hollywood in its tracks. A remark so blunt, so personal, and so deeply tied to an industry's long, complicated history with women's bodies that it instantly ignites debate across generations. A modern-day rising star, one of the most recognizable faces of Gen Z Hollywood, suddenly finds herself at the center of a controversy she didn't start and didn't ask for. And on the other side, a living legend. A woman whose name is etched into cinematic history, whose image defined an era, whose voice still carries weight decades after her peak. When Sydney Sweeney is discussed as a potential fit for portraying Kim Novak, the iconic star of Vertigo, it should be a celebration of legacy. A passing of the torch. A moment where old Hollywood meets new. But instead, it becomes something else entirely. A comment emerges, startling in its candor. Novak reportedly suggests that Sweeney is too sexy for the role, adding a remark that many are now calling deeply controversial. She sticks out so much above the waist. In an industry already under scrutiny for how it treats women, their bodies, their age, their worth, this moment doesn't just raise eyebrows. It forces a reckoning. Is this a case of generational misunderstanding? A harsh truth spoken without filter? Or a reflection of Hollywood's unresolved tension between beauty, talent, and perception? Because beneath the headlines, beneath the viral tweets and heated debates, lies a deeper question, one that goes far beyond casting. What does it really mean to be too sexy for a role in an industry built on selling sex appeal? And who gets to decide? To understand why this moment is resonating so powerfully, you have to understand the two women at the center of it, and the eras they represent. Kim Novak is not just another name from Hollywood's past. She is a symbol of classic cinema, a defining face of the 1950s and 60s, best known for her haunting performance in Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. Her presence on screen was not merely about beauty. It was about mystery, restraint, and an almost ethereal distance that captivated audiences. Novak's career was shaped in a studio system that controlled nearly every aspect of an actress's image. Public personas were carefully crafted. Sexuality was implied, never overt. Suggestive, but never explicit. There was an unspoken rule. Allure had to be subtle, almost elusive. Fast forward to today, and the landscape looks radically different. Sydney Sweeney has risen to prominence in an era dominated by social media, streaming platforms, and a far more direct relationship between celebrities and the public. Known for her roles in shows like Euphoria and The White Lotus, Sweeney has become a defining figure of modern Hollywood, not just for her acting ability, but for how openly her image is discussed, dissected, and at times objectified. Unlike Novak's era, today's entertainment industry does not shy away from sexuality. In fact, it often amplifies it. Sweeney's performances have included bold, vulnerable, and at times explicit scenes, choices that have earned both critical acclaim and intense public scrutiny. And that scrutiny is key to this story. Because for Sweeney, her body has often become part of the conversation in ways that male actors rarely experience. Interviews, headlines, and online discourse frequently center on her appearance, sometimes overshadowing her work. So when Novak's reported comment surfaces, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It lands in a cultural moment where conversations about body image, objectification, and generational divides are already at a boiling point. And then there's the role itself. Kim Novak's character in Vertigo is iconic, layered, complex, psychologically intense. It's not just a performance. It's a piece of cinematic history. Any suggestion of a remake or reinterpretation immediately invites scrutiny. Casting decisions in such projects are never purely about talent. They are about perception. About whether an actor can embody not just the role, but the legacy attached to it. So when Novak allegedly questions whether Sweeney is the right fit, framing it in terms of physicality and sexuality, it triggers a fundamental debate. Is she protecting the integrity of her legacy? Or reinforcing outdated standards about how women should be seen? According to reports circulating in entertainment media, Kim Novak expressed skepticism about the idea of Sydney Sweeney portraying her in a potential project. While the exact context of the comment is still being interpreted, one line in particular has captured widespread attention. "She sticks out so much above the waist." It's a statement that has been dissected, debated, and, in many cases, criticized. Some reports suggest Novak was referring to Sweeney's physical presence, implying that her body type or perceived overt sexuality might not align with the more understated, enigmatic quality that defined Novak's performances. However, it's important to note that, as with many celebrity comments, nuance can sometimes be lost in headlines. Full context matters: tone, intent, and the broader conversation surrounding the remark. Still, the reaction was immediate. Entertainment outlets picked up the quote. Social media platforms amplified it. And within hours, what might have once been a quiet industry opinion became a national conversation. Notably, Sydney Sweeney herself has not publicly responded to the comment, at least not in any confirmed or widely reported statement at the time of this discussion. That silence, intentional or not, has only added to the intrigue. Meanwhile, industry insiders and commentators began weighing in. Some defended Novak, arguing that she has the right to voice her opinion about who portrays her legacy. Others criticized the comment as reductive, focusing on Sweeney's body rather than her talent. And then there were those who saw something deeper, a generational clash playing out in real time. From a cultural perspective, this moment sits at the intersection of several ongoing debates. First, there's the question of casting authenticity. In Hollywood, it's not uncommon for original actors to express opinions about who should play them or reinterpret their iconic roles. In that sense, Novak's involvement in the conversation isn't unusual. But the language used matters. When criticism centers on physical attributes, particularly in a way that can be interpreted as sexualized, it raises concerns about whether the industry has truly evolved. There's also a generational lens to consider. Novak comes from an era where image control was strict and overt sexuality could be career-defining, sometimes in limiting ways. Sweeney, by contrast, operates in a space where openness and boldness are often celebrated, but also heavily scrutinized. What one generation sees as too much, another may see as confidence or authenticity. And then there's the business angle. Controversy in Hollywood is rarely just controversy. It's also attention. Projects gain visibility. Names trend. Conversations spark curiosity. Whether intentional or not, moments like this can influence casting decisions, audience expectations, and even the direction of future productions. Almost instantly, the internet became a battleground of opinions. Some users defended Kim Novak, arguing that as the original star, she has earned the right to speak candidly about her legacy. Others felt her comments were out of touch, reflective of an older Hollywood mindset that judges women too harshly based on appearance. Meanwhile, supporters of Sydney Sweeney pushed back strongly, pointing to her acting range and questioning why her body continues to dominate the conversation. Across platforms, hashtags began trending. Clips, interviews, and past performances were shared and analyzed. Some praised Sweeney's talent, highlighting her emotional depth in recent roles. Others debated whether modern casting choices prioritize popularity over authenticity. And then there were the more nuanced takes, voices calling for a deeper conversation about how women in Hollywood are perceived, both then and now. Because at its core, this isn't just about two actresses. It's about an industry and an audience, grappling with its own evolving standards. Looking ahead, this moment could have ripple effects beyond a single casting debate. For Sydney Sweeney, it places her at the center of a cultural conversation that could shape how she is perceived moving forward. Will she be seen as a serious, dramatic actress? Or will discussions about her image continue to overshadow her work? For Kim Novak, it adds a new chapter to her legacy, one that intersects with modern debates about representation and respect. And for Hollywood as a whole, it raises important questions. Can the industry move beyond reductive narratives about women's bodies? Can it honor legacy while embracing change? And perhaps most importantly, Who gets to define what is appropriate for a role in an era where boundaries are constantly shifting? Strip away the headlines, and there's a human story here. A young actress navigating fame, scrutiny, and expectation in real time. A veteran icon reflecting on her past, her image, and how it is carried forward. Both women, in different ways, shaped by the same industry, but under entirely different rules. For everyday viewers, this resonates because it mirrors broader societal experiences. The feeling of being judged, of being reduced to appearance, of navigating expectations that don't always make sense. It's not just a Hollywood story. It's a human one, and now the conversation turns to you. Do you think Sydney Sweeney could successfully take on a role inspired by Kim Novak? Or do you believe Novak's concerns reflect something valid about preserving cinematic legacy? This is one of those moments where there's no easy answer, only perspectives. So join the discussion. Share your thoughts. Because in today's media landscape, your voice is part of the story. And if you want more deep, investigative breakdowns like this, stories that go beyond the headlines and into what really matters, make sure you stay connected. This conversation is far from over. To fully grasp why this moment has exploded the way it has, you have to slow everything down and trace how a single comment evolved into a full-scale cultural flashpoint. Because stories like this don't just appear overnight, they build, layer by layer, through years of shifting industry norms, media framing, and public perception. The foundation begins decades ago, with Kim Novak at the height of her fame. In the late 1950s, Novak wasn't just an actress. She was an image. Carefully constructed, tightly managed, and deeply influenced by the studio system that defined Hollywood's golden age. Her performances, particularly in Vertigo, were rooted in a kind of controlled mystique. Emotions simmered beneath the surface. Sexuality was present, but never explicit. It was suggested through glances, posture, tone, not overt physicality. Back then, actresses were often molded into very specific archetypes. Deviating from that image could be risky. Careers could stall. Reputations could shift overnight. And perhaps most importantly, the power to define that image rarely belonged to the actresses themselves. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the contrast couldn't be sharper. Sydney Sweeney emerges in an era where control has, at least partially, shifted. Actors now have platforms, social media, independent production companies, direct fan engagement, that allow them to shape their own narratives. But that freedom comes with a different kind of pressure. Because while the industry no longer hides sexuality, it often magnifies it. Sweeney's breakout roles didn't just showcase her acting. They also placed her in the center of conversations about body image, nudity on screen, and the expectations placed on young actresses in modern storytelling. Shows like Euphoria pushed boundaries, sparking both praise for their raw honesty and criticism for their intensity. And here's where the timeline begins to converge. As Sweeney's star continues to rise, discussions about her casting in more complex, legacy-driven roles begin to surface. Industry speculation, sometimes grounded, sometimes purely hypothetical, starts linking her name to projects that require not just talent, but transformation. That's when the idea, or at least the conversation, of her potentially portraying Kim Novak gains traction. Whether it originated from casting rumors, media speculation, or broader discussions about who could represent classic Hollywood figures in modern cinema, the connection becomes part of the narrative. And then the comment. Reports emerge quoting Novak's reaction, a reaction that, depending on interpretation, ranges from candid to controversial. The phrasing, particularly the line about Sweeney sticking out so much above the waist, becomes the focal point. What makes this story resonate so deeply is that it doesn't feel new. In fact, it feels familiar. Hollywood has a long, complicated history with labeling actresses as too sexy, a phrase that, on the surface, might sound like a compliment, but in practice often carries limitations. Throughout film history, actresses who were perceived as highly sexualized frequently found themselves boxed into specific roles, their range questioned, their depth underestimated. Their opportunities, in some cases, quietly narrowed. In earlier decades, stars like Marilyn Monroe, often celebrated for their beauty, also struggled against the perception that they couldn't carry serious, dramatic performances. It wasn't a lack of talent. It was a lack of recognition. And while the industry has evolved, traces of that mindset still linger. When someone is described as too sexy for a role, what does that really mean? Is it about physical appearance? Audience perception? Typecasting? Or is it a reflection of deeper biases about how women are allowed to exist on screen? In the case of Sydney Sweeney, this question becomes especially relevant because her career so far has demonstrated range, emotional intensity, vulnerability, complexity. Yet, time and again, conversations circle back to her appearance. It raises an uncomfortable truth. For all the progress Hollywood has made, the industry and the audience still wrestle with separating image from ability when it comes to women. And Novak's reported comment, whether intended that way or not, taps directly into that history. Another critical layer to this story is the role of media amplification. In today's digital landscape, a single quote rarely remains a single quote. It becomes a headline, then a trending topic, then a talking point across multiple platforms. And with each step, nuance can shift. The phrase attributed to Kim Novak is a perfect example. On its own, it may have been part of a broader conversation, one that included context about character interpretation, acting style, or generational differences in performance. But once isolated, it takes on a life of its own. Headlines are designed to capture attention, to provoke reaction, to encourage clicks. So the most striking part of a statement often becomes the centerpiece. She sticks out so much above the waist. It's vivid, it's specific, and it's undeniably provocative. From there, the media ecosystem does what it does best. It multiplies the conversation. Panel discussions analyze it. Articles interpret it. Social media reframes it through humor, criticism, or support. And in the process, the original intent, whatever it may have been, becomes just one piece of a much larger narrative. This doesn't mean the reaction is unwarranted, but it does highlight how quickly stories can evolve beyond their origins. While public reaction often dominates the conversation, there's another layer that's less visible but equally important: what industry insiders are thinking. Casting directors, producers, and agents understand that roles tied to iconic performances come with immense pressure. Choosing the wrong actor can impact not just a film's success, but its credibility. From that perspective, discussions about physical presence, screen energy, and audience perception are not uncommon. However, the way those discussions are framed matters. Behind closed doors, decisions are often described in terms like fit, tone, or interpretation. Publicly, those same ideas can come across very differently, especially when tied to physical descriptors. Some insiders, according to general industry sentiment, might interpret Novak's comment as a blunt articulation of a common concern: whether a modern actress known for a certain type of role can convincingly embody a very different, historically specific character. Others see it as a misstep, an outdated way of expressing that concern, one that risks reinforcing stereotypes rather than addressing artistic considerations. And then there's the business reality. Names like Sydney Sweeney bring attention, audience interest, marketability. In an industry where financing often depends on recognizable faces, that matters. So even if debates like this emerge, they don't necessarily determine outcomes. They simply become part of the conversation point. One of the most intriguing aspects of this story is what hasn't happened. Sydney Sweeney has not issued a public response, at least not one that has been widely confirmed or reported. In an era where celebrities often respond quickly to controversy, that silence stands out. And it may be intentional, because responding directly could escalate the situation, turning a one-sided comment into a back-and-forth narrative. By staying quiet, Sweeney avoids amplifying the controversy, allowing the conversation to unfold without her direct involvement. It's a strategy that